Hello, something a little bit different today. This is a 2014 Piaggio Ape. Reads ape, but it's pronounced ape in reference to the Italian for bee. These were originally all two-stroke, and so sounded a bit like bee, or so someone thought when buzzing around the streets of Italian towns and villages. Anyway, this one isn't a two-stroke, it's a diesel. It's a single-cylinder Greaves diesel engine, and it's got a bit of a diesel leak. So today, I'm going to be hopefully fixing the leak, changing the oil as well. It's just had an MOT and I've inspected all the wheel bearings and brakes and stuff like that, so it's not a full service, I guess, but we're going to fix the diesel leak and then change the oil as well. After that, we'll do a test drive and show you around it a little bit more. So for those of you not familiar, it's kind of half motorbike and half car, in that the brakes are off a single pedal, which you can see down there. It's got a handbrake, parking brake, like a car, but then handlebars. So throttle here, clutch here, gears here. It's also got a reverse gear down there, and then decompression for starting and stopping just there. And the engine is under that cover just there. So here's the mighty engine, a single cylinder Greaves diesel engine, found in all sorts of generators and other things, no doubt. Don't know whether you can spot it, but this pipe is a little bit wet, and it's this flexible section just here that is leaking. So this is a return pipe, goes all the way back up to here and then back into the tank. Fortunately, you can buy another one. Not ridiculously expensive, so what we're going to do is replace that and then test it, hopefully stop it from leaking. This is a 2014, it's only done about 1,000 kilometres, so a little bit disappointed that it's leaking at this stage, but it is what it is. I'll show you how much the engine vibrates, which might give you a clue as to why we've got a leak. So I decided to start at the tank end of the pipe. So we're down on the left hand side of the vehicle now at the back. This is the fuel tank, and that's the other end of the pipe we're dealing with. Check that the fuel tank isn't absolutely brim full, because if it is and it's up into here, then we could have a leak out of here. I think this is a 6mm. No, it's not, it's a 7. Going to encourage that off there with a blunt screwdriver. Okay, so the next step is just work back along the pipe and doing the two banjo bolts. I've got a flare nut spanner which I'm going to use, a Can't get a socket into this one, could get a socket onto that one, but in fact that might be better because I don't think I'll be able to get the clearance for the spanner in there. We'll see how we get on. Before I do this, I'm just going to use a bit of compressed air. There wasn't actually much dust there, but just to get rid of any residual bits and pieces to minimise the amount that gets, or that might get back into the fuel line. I hope none will get into the fuel line, but get a rag underneath to catch the drips. So the 12. Just check that the new item is the same as the old one. Looks good. Okay, let's start bolting the new one back up. I've got some new washers for these banjo bolts. The ones I got are aluminium. I was going to order genuine Piaggio ones, but they weren't in stock. Didn't really want to wait. Making a bit of a meal of that, aren't I? Wondering if having the other end loosely held in place first would help with the installation of this end, so let's try that. Yeah, it looks like it might do. I'm going to put this tube inside a glove just to feed it through, because there's all manner of muck under here. I tend to do this sort of thing by feel rather than using a torque wrench of any sort. Make sure that isn't touching, and it's not. It's close, but it's not touching. There was more to go with that clip. I wasn't just abusing it and trying to turn it past where it would stop. But it has obviously decided it's had enough. Been working with that same fuel hose for 5 years. Just didn't want to start a new relationship with another fuel hose. So we'll have a new one. I don't want to over tighten this, but diesel leaks will find a way through anywhere if there is a way to be found. So what I'll probably do is leave it at that. It's got a good grip on the hose, you can tell, and then we'll see how it goes when we start it up. So the last thing to do, thankfully this has got a manual primer on it. Can't quite tell if that was enough, but let's have a go. Okay, so that looks like we've sorted that out. I was checking it while it was running. Obviously I didn't speak to you about that because you wouldn't have been able to hear a thing I was saying, but it's quite difficult to focus on the parts when it's running because of the vibration. However, looking at them now, there's no leaking at all there, and there's none at the tank end either, so that's good. The engine's warm, so I'm going to change the oil now. You may wonder why I didn't have it draining while I was doing this fuel pipe. Well, the fuel pipe was the thing that I really wanted to get done today. The oil could kind of wait, so I wanted to get this finished so the vehicle's usable again before starting to do the oil as well, so that was why I kind of focused on that. So we'll move on to the oil now. I'm actually going to do the engine oil and the gearbox oil. Two separate reservoirs, but they take the same oil. There's the filler for the engine oil and there's the dipstick. I'll move the camera around and we'll take the cover off underneath and then we'll get to the oil change. Okay, let's get started with the oil change. There's just about enough space, he says. To do this without jacking it up. So 3 self-tapping screws each side first of all. So the one in the middle on this side is right behind this pulley. Actually, that pulley's got to come off anyway. So let's do that now. So this flywheel needs to come off. They're a bit of a pain to have to do it. Usually I would use an impact on this, but I haven't got my impact with me today. So, slightly more old school method, which works just as well, and involves an axle stand. This is all just to get the tray off so that I can get to the oil filter. There we go. I'll get that back in a minute. The final challenge is these two bolts underneath in the middle, which is going to be very difficult for me to get the camera in, so I'm just going to take those off. Right, the last stage in this rather protracted process is to unhook the under tray off these sharp metal clips at the side, and to do that it's best to actually get in the back. Feed it down past the drive shafts, and there it goes. Okay, so much as I would love to pretend it didn't happen, I think we all saw it. Dropped a screw down here, and you can't really leave that there because the starter ring gear is round the edge and that would just get completely fouled up. So I had to loosen this cover. Doesn't come off completely, but it came down enough to get a magnet in there to get the screw out. So pro tip for you, don't do what I did and let go of the under tray screw and let it fall in there, because that will add a lot of time to this job. Okay, so we can put that cover back now. In fact, I'm going to start the oil draining first and then put the cover back.
Get rid of that for you, somebody.
So while we're doing that, just give the drain plug a clean. It's got a little magnet on it, have a look, see what sort of stuff is on there, if any. This one doesn't look too bad. So next we turn our attention to the oil filter, which is just there, so facing towards the cab. I've moved the drain pan back as far as I can. And hopefully you'll be able to undo it by hand. Right, that's been draining for a good old while now, so I'm going to put the new filter on. I'm just going to clean the filter mating surface of any old oil. So just a word about oil filters while we're here. I haven't actually managed to find an aftermarket filter that is the right size for this engine. I thought I had, and there is one listed on TechDoc and stuff like that, but it wasn't actually right when it got to it, so I always use a Piaggio genuine one, which as you'll see is actually a Greaves 42244. I'm doing it pretty much as tight as I can by hand. I don't use any tools. So now let's move our attention to the gearbox oil. Strictly speaking, this doesn't need doing quite as often as the engine, but I kind of figure while I'm here I may as well. Also, last time the oil didn't look too great. So I thought I'd change it again this time. It's the same oil as goes in the engine. Yeah, I can tell straight away that doesn't look too bad, but hey, it doesn't take very much oil, so simple enough to change it. Okay, so we've got both the drain plugs in. Time to fill up with oil. The oil is quite an old school viscosity, shall we say, in that it's 15W40. Very hard to find a fully synthetic in that grade, which is what I'd usually use, but Castrol GTX, I believe that is a semi-synthetic. The capacity is 1.7 litres for the engine and just over a litre, 1.08 if we're being precise about it for the gearbox. Seems to appreciate a slow pour, as you can tell. So that's about 1.6. I'll just let that settle for a bit. While I do the gearbox. So I'm just going to check the oil level now, put about a litre in to the gearbox. And that's up to the maximum, which is good. Very careful with the threads on this because they are super fragile. Let's have a look at the engine level now. That's a little bit over full at the moment, but it won't have gone through the filter yet. Okay, so the oil levels in the gearbox and the engine are topped up to a point where we can start it up and check for leaks. I'm going to do that without putting that little pulley wheel back on and without putting the cover back on. Once I've checked everything looks okay, I'll be putting those on. I'm not going to show that because it's a real pain to get the camera in, to be quite honest, and it's just a question of reversing the removal process. So hook the under tray onto those two little metal hooks that have very sharp edges, so make sure you don't cut your fingers. Then do the two bolts in the middle. They're a real pain because the bolts aren't captive on the other side, so you've got to have one hand in above, like inside the under tray, and then use your other hand below to screw the nut on. And then it's a case of those three screws either side, making sure you do not drop them into the flywheel, because that would be a real pain. So I'm going to get on and do that. Okay, time for the test drive. I'm doing this on my GoPro because it's the only way I can film inside here. Close the door, listen to that reassuring clunk, a bit like an Audi, but not quite. No inertia reel seat belts, although there is a seat belt. So if you can't see it, that's the sound of me just doing that up. Bit pointless really, but as it's got it, you know, I feel like I have to give it a go. Okay, I'm not going to be talking much while we're driving because, well, you'll see why. It's far too noisy, you won't be able to hear a thing. So starting up, key in neutral, decompression up, turn to the first position, spin it up, Okay, I've just stopped to check that we haven't got any leaks anywhere. I'll just tell you a little bit more about the cab layout while I'm here. So lights, wiper with wash wipe as well. The wiper doesn't park itself, so you've got to switch it off where you want it to stop, either there or there, depending on your preference. Hazards, an electric heater which has never been used for fear that something might catch fire or something terrible might happen. Phone charging socket, spare wheels under the seat, as you can probably tell, jacks under the seat as well, and then there's some tools in there and some more underneath. The battery's down there. Probably hear it start to rain. So we'll do a bit of reversing so you can see what that involves.